How do you choose between using GenAI coding versus coding from scratch?
It's like, should I order food online or cook something today?
Hello, curious learners. So I have been struggling with a question since past few days, which is whether to focus on building the actual projects using GenAI tools like, let's just say, ChatGPT, Claude, or recently Gemini, or focus on building projects from scratch where our core coding skills or core development skills are enhanced. And if you are like me and if you are struggling with the same question, then here is a solution to this problem, which I have figured out just recently. And let me just tell you the problem first. So let's just say you are like a beginner into the development field and you are like recently introduced to GenAI based tools as well as coding from scratch. And if you are following online tutorials, then the entire development community is biased, whether beginners in the field or even the professionals should focus on GenAI based project development, or they should focus on developing projects from scratch and have a better understanding of the core concepts as well. So the advantage of GenAI based approach is that you have product owner mindset where you are focusing on building the products rather than focusing on the actual code itself. You are like trying to solve the problem in the most effective and the most faster manner. That is, the prototyping of the projects is much faster, and you are able to build projects really in a better manner because GenAI tools are really advanced and they are able to build projects in a lot more beautiful and a lot more concise way than what we can build from our own from scratch. And in that way we are able to build real world projects which are actually useful and which can be like prototyped or tested out in the real world faster, and we can build them effectively. So this is the GenAI based approach. And the disadvantage of this approach is we are not learning how to code from scratch. We are not learning the core concepts, and we don't know sometimes that whether how the underlying code works or how it actually gels well. And the disadvantage of this is been that in the interviews, if somebody asks about the code in the project or some concept, we might not be able to answer it. Now, on the second side of the table is coding from scratch, where you are not using GenAI tools like directly. You might use code completions, you might use Copilot into VS Code for basic development or writing the code snippets, but not like creating the entire project using GenAI tools. You are like focusing on the core concepts, you are building projects from scratch using tutorials, you are trying to understand how the code works, and you are developing your critical thinking into solving the problem solutions, and you're integrating theory and practice in a much more effective manner, which helps you in the real interviews because there you will be able to answer the conceptual questions in a much better manner. But the disadvantage of this approach is the prototyping is really slow because you are like coding from scratch, you are coding different snippets or parts of the project one by one. Secondly, instead of product owner mindset, you are into the coder mindset where you are focusing on the code rather than whether the project actually solves the problem. And the layout might not be great because you have to figure out all things on your own. And then comes the design part, and you have to like first design something properly, then code it, and then try to see whether it works. And it's basically a time consuming process. And I have like faced this situation myself where I was like struggling whether I should focus on GenAI based project development where I am able to build products and showcase them to the world, or should I build projects from scratch again like I used to and suffer from slower prototyping and building projects slower. For GenAI, I generally use Lovable Dev and Gemini sometimes recently, and yeah, Claude also works most of the times. And for coding from scratch, we can go for VS Code extensions like, let's just say, GitHub Copilot or Cursor or some other tools which you are integrating into VS Code and using them for like building the basic code snippets. You are like not building the entire, asking Cursor to build the entire project, but you are like utilizing some GenAI but not entirely, and you are coding from scratch. You are understanding the code from scratch. Now, one approach which I thought would work best is the hybrid approach. And how do this approach solve this problem is, let's just say you are building the entire project using GenAI tool, but you are not like directly showcasing to the world, but you are also focusing on how the project works within the hood. Like you are not just building a complete GenAI app, but you are going into the GenAI app itself and you are focusing on the code line by line, trying to understand what the code actually does and what it is trying to achieve, and the code which is generated, you try to understand that line by line and try to see whether there is something that is not, you know, already know, and you try to focus on that aspect and then you try to learn from it. Now the hybrid approach advantages are firstly balanced learning and development, where you get the advantage of faster prototyping but also you are learning the code. Obviously you are not writing much of the code, but in today's like scenario, it's not like much required to write the code from scratch unless and until you are working on, let's just say, industry level projects where you have to like write the code line by line, or you are like working on a really critical project where each line of code matters. For learning purposes, we can go ahead with code snippets. You don't have to like write the code line by line. Secondly, we are able to utilize GenAI tools effectively in this case, where, as let's just say, if I go for something like Gemini or Lovable Dev or even Bolt, I'm able to use those tools effectively, but I'm also trying to understand how the code works as well. And if there is some issue, I will be able to figure out the actual core problem in it. Like the one issue that vibe coders or vibe coding faces is, what happens if AI is not able to solve the problem? Yes, that's a genuine concern. And in these cases, in the hybrid approach, what we do is we take the code project locally and we try to figure out the problem solution on our own, and then we fix it, and then we pass the control back to GenAI based tool to like solve the other problems or create more features into it. In this approach, we are able to learn core concepts more effectively, and creativity in projects is not impacted because you are not like going into a coder's mindset or product owner mindset. You are somewhere in between where you are learning how to build an app first, and then you are like learning how the code of the app works. Now let me just show you this with a example piano app which I just built yesterday, just 2 days back, where I built it using Gemini tool and then I tried to understand the code. So this is the app which I have. Let me just show you the preview. So basically it's a piano app with some labels. Let me just play a key. So it's a piano app which I like recently created using Gemini, and I just not left like on hosting or the actual project showcase part. Like I did not just left that okay, project is complete, we are done. But what I did was I opened the code of the actual project and I tried to go through it line by line. So for example, if we go into the virtual piano app, you can see that there are some imports first. Then there is a body with some CSS properties, which most of the properties I already know. Then there is a piano container where there is a new property called WebKit overflow scrolling. So what I can do is I can search for what this does. So I can like copy this and then ask Gemini and like what this property does. And Gemini will answer me the actual in detail answer of what the WebKit overflow scrolling CSS property is. So as you can see, it told me that it controls the, let me just read through it. So it controls the scrolling behavior of elements with overflow auto or overflow scroll. And for Safari, when it is set to touch, it enables momentum scrolling, which is inertial scrolling. And this means that when you flick your finger to scroll, the content continues to scroll for short duration. After you lift your finger, like some inertia is generated, gradually it decelerates. And in this case, in terms of iOS, this works better. So this is the first thing which I learned from this project code, which is the CSS property. Then the next thing the interesting property which I want to focus on today is the user select property. And as you can see, the individual key that the piano app has, it has a property which is user select and is set to none. And I was curious as to what this property does. So I asked Gemini, okay, tell me about the user select none CSS property. And it created a canvas and it told me the advantages of this. Firstly, user select property like prevents the text selection, like the user cannot highlight, copy or drag text within the element. And this is important for mobile applications because recently I was creating another game which is a 3D game, and I had some controls like on-screen controls like directional controls and action button controls. and I had added a text within the button. The issue that happened was when I long press on the button, it showed me the cut copy and select all pop up onto it, and that was hampering my actual control behavior. And I wasn't able to like achieve it using a CSS property. So eventually, what I did was I replaced the actual text with an icon, and that way it was able to like prevent the cut copy paste or other menu selection. But the problem remain in the text remained, and I had to use some workaround instead of focusing on some CSS property which would fix it. And in this app I came to realize that okay, user select can be set to none, and that way the text would not have got highlighted and my task would have been done using simple text instead of like going into icon files, which are a little bit more memory intensive. Then the cursor change text selection does not appear, and the interactive element will still work. Like let's just say for buttons and stuff, the elements will work. And this is mainly, as I mentioned, for game elements like custom controls. When there will be text label, they won't be selected when you click on the button. In our case, when I go to this piano app again, so let me just open the piano app, and as you can see we have a label here, right? And I am supposed to long press this key like and release it. Now on keyboard or on the laptop this isn't an issue, but when I'm like using this piano app on phone and if I long press on this button, I know that when this key like this element is being clicked, it will show me the cut copy paste pop-up, which I don't want. And that was solved using this user select none, which like prevented the actual key label to be selected. And this is an interesting property. Let's just dive into a little bit further. Then the another important thing where we can use this property is drag and drop interfaces. For example, let's just say you are building some task manager like Todoist, or let's just say Jira or some other task manager where you are supposed to drag the elements from to do to done. In that case, in this interfaces, we can like set this property to prevent the text being selected and the drag and drop functionality to work properly. And especially in games, when you are like building mobile games, this property is really useful. Then for copyright protection as well, like it can prevent casual copying of content. And these are the four properties which are needed. First is the standard one, then WebKit user select for Chrome, Safari, Opera. Mozilla has Moz user select, and Internet Explorer and Edge we have MS user select. And this is the actual demo. So what I did was I ran that demo on my phone, and as you can see, this is a selectable text and this is a non-selectable text, and like dragging the mouse over it will not select it. Similarly, long pressing on this text won't select it on mobile. So this is the very thing which I wanted to focus on, that we just don't create projects just for the sake of creating them, but we actually go into the code, we deep dive into the actual code snippets, and we try to understand okay what this code actually does. And by that we are able to understand the code in a much better manner. We don't like go on repeatedly writing stuff which we already know. For example, background color, border and width and height, these are some things which I at least already know, and I don't want to focus on them repeatedly or write them repeatedly. But some things like this, which are the user select property, which I didn't knew about and which I just knew or learned today because the GenAI tool used it. I didn't knew it, but GenAI tool knew it and it used it in its project. So I was able to learn about it, and in the upcoming project, if there is some issue which let's just say some GenAI tool is not able to figure out. For example, when I was creating the 3D game, the GenAI tool wasn't able to figure this out. But if I would have just wrote this CSS property manually into the code, it would have fixed the problem then and there rather than like going to the font and other stuff. So that's the thing which I wanted to focus on. Like we don't have to like write the code from scratch, but we can focus on the code written by GenAI tools and we can like go through it line by line and try to understand them. For example, there is another property here which is pointer events none, which is also an interesting property which I'm going to cover in the next part or the part 2 of this video, where we'll focus on pointer events. And we will try to understand the code line by line of this piano app. We are going to like decompress or unravel the entire code of this piano app, and we are going to understand the code in detail. By that way, even if I don't write the code, I at least know where and where to use the properties, and the next time I am not able to figure some problem solution, then I will be able to remember, okay, this is where I had used this property and this is where I had learnt about it and I can use it in my future projects. So I am focusing more on building interesting games using GenAI tools in my future series as well, and these properties will actually help me at least into the actual game development. So that's the one thing, and this is the approach which I was talking about. So let me just restart the presentation. And hybrid approach which I was talking of is this approach where you are balancing learning and development. You're using Gen AI tools, but you are also focusing on the core concepts, and in this way we are able to learn about the projects in a much more better manner. Tools like Gemini, tools like Lovable, tools like Bolt are there to create projects faster, but that doesn't mean we just keep on creating projects and ignore the underlying code, because tomorrow we are going to work for some company or some client, and that client is going to ask for changes or some custom requirements, and if we don't know the underlying code, we won't be able to help that client or gain valuable insight by which we are able to actually solve the problems which the client is facing. And for that we need to know the underlying code line by line. We need to optimize the code as well. One important thing is sometimes GenAI tools write a lot of unnecessary code, and by understanding the entire code and going through it line by line, we are able to better optimize it as well. So that's the another aspect of why we should focus on code once we are like done building the project itself. So that was the entire gist of today's video, where I focused on the first the problem, then the solution, and then the actual example of how to use that solution for effective learning. So if someone tells you that don't use GenAI tools, code from scratch, I hope you don't listen to them, because GenAI tools are there for us to use, and if we are not utilizing them, we are falling behind. But also don't go full into the GenAI tools and don't focus on learning at all, because that is going to affect your future job chances, because people in the industry are expecting you to understand the code and understand the concepts, because that is why they hire you for your skills, and they aren't going to question your skills using the same questions which we all face in day-to-day learning. So focus on the code as well, focus on the GenAI tools as well, and go ahead with this hybrid approach if you can. Now, this is a recommendation and not something which I would like to say, oh, hey, go ahead and follow this, but it's something which is working for me right now, and I just wanted to let you know that this might work for you as well. And that's the gist of today's video. If you found this video useful, then like the video, because I gave you a piece of advice which might change the trajectory of your career or change the trajectory of your learning. The only thing which I ask is to like the video so that it reaches to other people as well, and I am able to at least earn something from, let's just say, some way, because I am spending my time here with you all, so I expect at least something in return. That's the only basic consideration. So like the video, subscribe to this channel for more such content, because I just don't post about technical content currently, but I also like post jokes. I post about how to create videos and images using GenAI tools and a host of other videos. So you will be like able to learn from that as well. So it's not just about boring coding or physics, but I am trying to make this channel as interesting as possible for you all. Hit the bell icon for notifications of my next video. And that's it from my end for today. Hope you found this video useful, and go back and try to like implement this hybrid approach into your next project and see whether it works. If it works, come back and comment on this video that it worked for you. If it didn't, or if you have some other feedback for me, tell me in the comments, and have a nice day ahead. So yeah, goodbye.
Subscribe for more such content.